Hey, Michaela.
Hi, Matt.
What's the most important part of a boat?
That it doesn't sink?
Correct. Welcome to What the Washington, a historical, social, and political tour of the weirdest state in the nation. I'm Matt.
I'm Michaela.
And today's episode is about a somewhat recently defunct company in the last 5 years.
I feel like it's been 10.
5.
Really?
It's 5.
Feels like a long time without these little guys zooming around.
Yeah. Michaela, name some things that you have in your mind that are like common tourist / destinations and tours of our fair area, especially in Seattle.
I'm not going to say the one that you're going to lead me to because I already know what it is. So, Underground Seattle.
That's on my list.
Pike Place.
That's also on my list.
Space Needle.
That's also on my list.
If you're sicko, the Stadium District.
Lake Soto.
Soto.
Mm-hmm.
There was a giant duck, I think in Soto, not too long ago.
What a segue.
I know. It was very popular.
Yes. And today's topic is about a duck, but a duck of a different feather. This is a follow-up on just weird Seattle things, but also engineering disasters, which I also cover, about the Ride the Duck tours that used to be very common here in Seattle. Well, not here where we live, but in Washington. Have you ever been on the duck tour?
Yeah, but it didn't go in the water because I went in the winter. I'm pretty sure it was maybe November when I went on the duck tour. Did you go on a duck tour?
I've never been on a duck tour.
Not even in elsewhere?
No.
Not Seattle?
Nope.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't get really the full experience of the duck tour because, not to steal your thunder, but the whole thing is that it transitions from land to sea. I didn't get to experience that part, but perhaps it was for the best.
Yeah, and that's actually the topic, is the rise and fall of Ride the Duck tours. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I can't believe that they only shut down in 2020. If I think about when I wrote it, I guess it was probably around 2013 or 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And it closed a few years. Well, I thought it was less than 6 years later. But yeah, I'm surprised it didn't shut down sooner than that.
It's pretty surprising when you go and look back through this, because you would think that they shut down this particular kind of operation earlier than they did. Let's dive right into it. What we're talking about is a company called Ride the Duck, which was founded in Branson, Missouri.
What a place to found a water-based company.
Yeah. Well, the Ozark river and lake systems there, and that's what they base all of it out of. And it's just really weird to be like, our company's founded in the Ozarks, but it was founded in 1977 by Robert McDowell.
1977 is much earlier than I thought.
You thought it was older than that?
Yeah, because I know where those boats come from.
Right.
And so Do you want me to steal it from you, or do you?
I wrote out a whole technical spiel about the duck vehicle and its inception and where it came from, but you could talk about it a little bit.
Okay, well, so the duck boats are out of Vietnam.
Actually, even earlier than that.
Oh, okay.
They come from, all the duck boats were built in World War II.
Oh, okay. So maybe the 70s isn't so surprising.
Yeah, but like, think about that. Every single duck that was on the road was at that point almost 80 years old or 70 years old.
Yeah, but that makes more sense because when I heard 77, I thought, okay,
the company.
I thought this is like a few years after Vietnam or during Vietnam. And when did Vietnam end?
1975.
Okay, so
which
few
makes
years
sense,
after.
yeah, because surplus, and that's where all of these came from. They came from surplus.
But it loses some of the novelty of like, oh, look at this cool thing. If people literally were on them 2 years ago, but the fact that they're from World War II and not Vietnam actually makes more sense for that 70s time
right.
to.
A lot of military equipment becomes commercial available in the 70s after after the Vietnam War, from the Second World War, because it's not even technologically useful anymore. But Robert McDowell got his hands on a fleet of Duck, which is an acronym. It's not spelled technically Duck. It is spelled DUKW, which D stands for 1942 production date. U stands for utility, K stands for all-wheel drive, and W stands for tandem rear axles, or tandem axles on both sides. The axle thing will become important later. Please flag that down. Flag it for there will be a test. Flag
Bookmark
it for later. The Duck is a 6.8 ton vehicle.
How does that compare to your like your Dodge Ram?
Well, now a third that weight.
And that's because it's made out of what?
Aluminum and steel.
Okay, so it is steel.
It's pure. It's like basically steel with aluminum pontoons.
Okay, because steel. I figured it was steel because it's World War II and also military vehicle.
Or traditionally.
And it's that heavy. So.
Yeah. And design-wise, that's a good thing to have a steel vehicle on the water, because steel doesn't rust like
right
that.
On the water. Yeah, this is a water vehicle, but when you think of it in terms of what we will be talking about later, it gets a little scary.
See, this is the thing, like, we do all the information in the beginning because when we get into the horror section of our story, it'll be like, oh, all of those things were great for this, but they weren't great for rolling through downtown Seattle on the tightest lanes in the entire state.
I feel like Elon Musk maybe should have Googled this before he decided to make the Cybertruck.
This is like if they made a cyber bus, right? Like this we'll come back to this. I don't want to laugh too much because it's like a really sad story, but it's just like the story of this could have been taught to any transit planner, basically, or any urban vehicle designer, and it would have been like, don't do these things. It's 32 or 31 feet long, lengthwise.
Which is like a school bus.
It's a school bus. It's 8 feet wide, and it's 8 feet and 10 inches tall. So this is a big vehicle.
It is a big thing. I think I perhaps was on a smaller version of this.
There's a couple of smaller versions.
When I wrote it, because I don't think it was quite 30 feet long. I think it was more like 15.
I was going to say some ducks are kind of pint-sized. Like, they weren't used explicitly for the big bus style. Some of them are like transportation vehicles. They were primarily transportation vehicles during the war, and they were designed by Rod Stevens Jr., who worked for a yacht manufacturer during the war, because in World War II all of the businesses that designed yachts and smaller boats were basically brought under the National Production Act to produce wartime boats. And so they were trying to find a halfway space between a yacht, a Higgins boat, as they call them, and basically a water taxi, like dinghy, that could roll on the ground once it landed. So the military has a funny way of asking for a vehicle that does like 50 different things, even though they could just have 3 different items that work particularly well instead of one thing that works kind of well on all of those categories. And they were making it in Massachusetts, and its test trial was to save 7 Coast Guardsmen who were stranded in the water on a boat, while the other boats went to go catch and get these Coast Guardsmen in Massachusetts. They were unable to because the tide conditions were really bad. It was 70-mile-per-hour winds, or 69, 70-mile-per-hour winds on the water, and it was heavy surf, so everything was rocking back and forth, so the boats were just not able to get to them, the smaller boats that they were sending out. But the Duck just did it. It just did it in no time, and it really scaled back the skepticism that a lot of the military men had of the vehicle. Originally, they were like, this is never going to work. So
what does the inside of a Duck look like? Is it car layout? Is it boat
it's
layout?
More like bench. It's like a bus, like you described it. It's kind of like a bus where you're kind of sitting 2 rows, and then there's the front seat, the driver, and there's a bunch of seats behind him, and you're just kind of sitting there, and there's a high lip on both sides, kind of higher than the wind, or up to the window, and you can see out the window, and the windows, sometimes they're open, sometimes they're canvas top, sometimes they're solid top, depending on where they were and what modifications have been made. But they're basically like buses. Like, if you look at them, for all intents and purposes, they're buses with really tall buses. That's also something that comes up that's important. These are tall, and that is a problem for street navigation.
I hope these have since been decommissioned into a museum somewhere.
I'm pretty sure that one of these vehicles is in the World War II museum that we went to in New Orleans. I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember seeing it, but
I think it's in like their little
like maybe in the front area.
Yeah. These Ducks, the acronym Duck, were built by GMC Pontiac in the Chevrolet division. Rest in peace, Pontiac. And they served in the Second World War, both in Europe, but primarily in the Pacific theater, and as like support vehicles, supply vehicles to recon units that were kind of out of the way. Anything that could have required amphibious actions. And they survived the war. Many of them survived the war. And then they were used in Korea in 1952, or one in 51 and 52, by the Army. And then at the end, or at the beginning of Vietnam, they were used as, boat craft that can go across river. But they're not used extensively because it's pretty old design, and they're pretty rickety at this point. They're not actually, they're kind of trashed, a lot of them, because it turns out it's a very hard vehicle to maintain, and that at that time it was the Department of War in World War II was like, we're only going to make 21,000 of these because these are very special use vehicles that require a lot of upkeep, and we don't want to have to keep making new ones later. So we'll order an initial amount and then kind of just move on from there. Unlike other vehicles in the war, which like they made like millions of. And they put the duck through its paces in Korea and Vietnam. They decommission it basically and then sell it to the civilian market as surplus. And that's where Mr. McDowell buys all these ducks and starts this business in the Ozarks. He expands to Boston, Massachusetts, Seattle in 1997, which I didn't realize he had started in 97. So they've been there for a minute at that point. Baltimore, Maryland, Stone Mountain, Georgia, Memphis, Tennessee, San Fran, Newport, Kentucky, Tamuning, Guam, and Mobile, Alabama. So he has a couple locations across the country that have these duck tours. Not to mention all the other tours that use ducks, which there are a lot.
Are they all shut down?
No, but a lot of them should be and have had accidents like what we're about to get into.
Okay.
When Ride the Duck came to Seattle, it was an instant hit. The ability to go from the land to the water was really exciting for a lot of tourists and a lot of people who live in Seattle, but who aren't able to enjoy, hopping on a private boat, basically, to get into the sound. However, eventually, the company itself was bought by Hershend Family Entertainment Corporation in 2004. And then later, in 2012, after some of these accidents start happening, or more accidents happen, it's sold to another company, a private investor, and then again in 2017, it's sold to Ripley's Entertainment.
Ripley, Believe It or Not thing?
That one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Michaela and our listeners, I did say that this is a tragedy. This is stories about real tragedies that happen. And I can't talk about Ride the Duck without talking about its myriad deaths and injuries and disfigurements that it's caused over the last 30 years almost now. 20 years. I did the tally based off of all the accidents that have happened, and
in Seattle or nationwide?
Nationwide.
Okay.
Under this company alone, and I tallied between 39 and 41 deaths, depending on when you count or what you count, and then 102 wounded by accidents of this particular company.
Major accident, major injury, or any injury?
Well, anything that was reported to the hospital.
Okay. So it could be small.
Could be small, but some of these settlements aren't. So let's get into the history, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the Seattle accident that makes this kind of like stick in our head. Starting in 1999, the first recorded accident. Recorded by like news and law, because we all know back in the 80s and the 90s they weren't great at documenting all the park accidents that have happened, because that place in New Jersey always keeps me thinking about Actionland, wasn't it? The place where the people,
I think so. Mm-hmm.
where people just would like straight up get like decapitated.
Is the water park?
The water park?
Yeah, I think it's Actionland.
Or Action Park, something like that.
Find it on Defunctland on YouTube if you have not ever watched that.
The plug, we gotta plug.
We'll plug Defunctland.
Defunctland's so good. There's so many good projects on there. Shout out to the Kid City episode. Nothing related to this.
That was so good.
That was so good.
I love Kid City.
I love the Kid City too.
Take me back to Kid City.
I'm the city councilor in Kid City. So 1999, one of the boats sinks.
This is nationwide.
This is nationwide.
Where is this at?
This is in Arkansas, Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Okay.
1999, 13 deaths of a complement of 21 people. 13 people die.
How are they stuck in the boat?
So this is the interesting part, and I'm going to get into this. The Coast Guard determined that a dislodged drive shaft seal caused the seal to be broken. So like the drive shaft, which allows it to drive underwater, allowed water to flood it, and the hull started to flood. And on the duck rides, it wasn't required. They didn't have a consistent policy of when and how you would wear life vest. You're supposed to wear life vest most often when you go in the water automatically, regardless. But several of these incidents you will find, and it is called out in the NTSB report, the National Transportation Safety Board. They call out the fact that they don't have a consistent policy about life vest, even though they should have a policy about everyone wearing a life vest.
So they did the Titanic.
Basically. So everyone had a life vest, technically, in the boat, but they all didn't have them on at the time that the sinking really started taking off, or like starting more and more, and the boat sank very quickly. The Coast Guard had to get them, and by the time that the Coast Guard got them, the boat was capsized and people were on top of it. The ones that survived, 8 out of 21 people.
So people just couldn't tread water for that long?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And they didn't have their life vest on. So
nobody was having a life vest on?
Yeah, no one did. Or people tried to put them on as the water was capsizing their boat. So that's in 1999. It's a big news story, but like it's Arkansas, like they're not like stopping the business over this, which they should, but that's me.
24 news cycle was already
full effect.
Is past OJ, so they could have been national news 24 hour, but they said not important.
Later on in July of 2010, in Philadelphia, 2 tourists die when the Duck was hit by a tugboat guided barge.
Oh, on the water.
On the water. There were 2 Hungarian tourists that were in the country for a church exchange program. And they were on the Delaware River. The Duck boat tour was on the Delaware River. This was not the Duck boat operator's fault.
I was going to say, which one got in which's way?
The tugboat captain was on his cell phone.
Oh, cool.
Because his wife called him about their young newborn child who had recently gotten out of surgery. So he was way more focused on his phone than he was focused on the water. Now, I will say that in navigation, both parties have a responsibility to avoid collisions, but if the Duck is just doing its normal round and the guy's not paying attention to his barge, to his cargo, he's the one in charge of his cargo. And if it's going to hit someone, it's his fault. This hits and sinks the Duck boat. Most people were luckily wearing life vests in this situation. So only 2 people die just from the direct impact. Mm-hmm. And 11 people are injured. The captain of the barge boat, the one that was the tugboat that was carrying the barge, ends up having a year in prison.
Yeah, for manslaughter.
And
which isn't too bad.
It's not. Well, this is technically an accident.
Yeah.
he has his license revoked. Like, he can't be a captain anymore. And they're in the victims of the family are awarded $17 million from the boating company's insurance.
From the tugboat.
Tugboat, yeah.
Company.
Not from Duck.
Okay.
Duck was found not liable.
Yeah, I
this.
imagine they also sued the tugboat company.
Yes, because they wrecked their boat.
Yeah.
So it was, I just mentioned all of the ones that they're involved with. They're not always liable. They weren't always liable for every single one that happened. Now, that will become sticky later with some other situations. In 2011, a motorcyclist in Seattle is run over by a duck boat.
I don't remember this one. Because I think the next one that you'll mention in Seattle was a bigger accident. Yes. So this would have happened before I rode the duck boat, I think.
Yes. He was driving his motorcycle, and then before, like when you're at a stop, you kind of do this. He got hit by the duck boat.
Because it couldn't see him?
And they dragged him for a block underneath the undercarriage. And it broke his arm, his pelvis, and his leg.
Ow.
And he got dragged for a block.
Yeah.
Underneath the boat.
That's not good.
Yes. You will see that pedestrian murder is
common.
Very common with these vehicles because they have these high and wide and bad blind spots all over it. So, in May of 2015, in Philadelphia, Philly and Seattle have a lot of incidents. In 2015, the duck boat killed a pedestrian. However, this pedestrian was walking when the light was green. If you know how Philadelphia is, it's a weird traffic city. A lot of foot traffic in spite of the lights. And this person, according to the witnesses on scene, said that she walked in front of the duck. The duck didn't see her in time and killed her. And the Ride the Duck company released and commented to the press that there was no citation issued. And, quote, the police indicated Ride the Ducks was not at fault. So,
okay,
they settled outside of court.
Yeah, because she jaywalked.
Yes, basically. So, like I said, another pedestrian accident. This one probably more preventable from the pedestrian side than the driver's side, because if you're driving a delivery truck and someone steps out in front of you, you can't even stop a delivery truck. So imagine a giant steel ship, basically. So then we go into September 2015, and this is the one that we remember in Seattle. In 2015, the Ride a Duck boat collided with a bus, a coach bus, Bel Air, on Aurora Avenue Bridge 99, or Highway 99. It's on the west side of the city. If you don't know, it's a bridge that is attached to the state highway that runs through the western half of the city.
I feel like, okay, if you don't know what Aurora Avenue is, my assumption is that you are from out of state and you're listening. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah.
Because Aurora Avenue is an infamous street.
For
iconic. Many reasons.
It's so iconic. It's iconic Seattle,
especially
for good
the
and
bridge.
For worse. Yeah, because it's literally, there's two main, well, now three, but historically there were only two main highways into Seattle, north and south, and it was the one on the way to Bothell and Kenmore and Lake City, and then there's Aurora Avenue, which also runs all the way to Everett. So like there's two main, besides I-5, state routes that go through. But yeah, this accident happened on the Aurora Avenue Bridge, where the Duck veered into oncoming traffic and hit a coach bus basically full speed.
Yeah, okay, so coach bus versus Ride the Duck. I'm assuming the bus will win, despite the fact that the Ride the Duck is heavy.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, open air. Second of all, when I rode the Duck, it stayed downtown. I can't imagine those things going on the highway.
Yeah. Or any kind of like state route.
Right.
Road, yeah.
Anything over 35 miles per hour seems insane.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the driver was like, I lost control of the vehicle. Yeah. And if you know anything about the Aurora Avenue Bridge, it's like all metal, like grating. So it's just shake. And that, I think, has something to do with the accident based off of the, yet again, another NTSB investigation.
Is this a route they would drive regularly?
I'm guessing. I don't even know, because I never got on a Duck, so I don't know how they got into the water or where they got into the water from.
Right.
But it seems like they were going into downtown and then going into the water.
I just don't understand why you would start outside of downtown.
Right.
And especially take Aurora if it's that intense of a, like, on your drive shaft.
Right.
Because those are old, first of all, old vehicles. Like you said, 2-axle vehicles.
Right. Dual axle. So both axles have 2 axles.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
like,
it's not.
In the shaking alone as like a passenger, and there's no seat belts, and there's no roof.
Right.
It just seems like, why would you even take that route?
Truly a recipe for disaster.
Why wouldn't you just go down First Avenue?
I don't know, honey. I genuinely don't know. I was looking at the route that they were going on. I just didn't understand why they chose that particular route.
Like, are they coming from Central District? Are they coming from Queen Anne?
I think it was coming from, like, Gasworks area. So, yeah, it would be on that
side. So maybe
side.
they drove the car into the ocean at Gasworks.
Something. Yeah. Like, I just don't understand. I just don't know how they got there.
Or the lake.
From that route. Yeah, I was thinking of lake, on the lakeside.
Okay.
The NTSB found the cause of the accident to be a fractured axle, or several fractured axles that caused the vehicle to completely fail in its steering. And so that's why when the driver said that it just veered into the oncoming traffic, it's because of that. So, I mean, the driver called it out right, but that's a big problem considering this is, at that point, almost 80-year-old, at that point, 70-something-year-old vehicle. If you're having axle problems, it's time to retire.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, sadly, the loss of those, there was a loss of life in this incident. It was 5 students who died, and then another 70 that were injured. So, you know, no small amount of people.
All of 5 that died from the boat? From the Duck?
I believe so.
I mean, the 70 people is clearly the bus.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're in a head-on collision. It's going to cause whiplash, I assume, at the least, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and so, you know, like I said, tragically, like, these people die in this vehicle accident. And I mean, the court battle, there's so many plaintiffs in this battle, of course. And the NTSB report just does nothing but indict the fact that the duck was just not up to snuff. And I'll go into some of the reasons of how did this happen. That's the last section of the podcast here. But at the end of the day, after many, many years of court, the victims and the survivors of this incident made through the court Duck or Seattle and Ride the Duck International pay $123 million in just awards, because some of them did class action, some of them did individually, and it was the deadliest traffic accident in Seattle ever on record.
Really? 5 people?
5 people and all the injuries. Because there were a lot of critical injuries in this particular accident.
So, well, I guess 5 is pretty high. There's been a lot of, multi-car fatalities. So that's why I was surprised. But they must be factoring in the injury list.
Yeah, because it's 70.
As deadly.
Yeah. And that wasn't even the last accident from a duck. Ride the Ducks. Like, that was in Seattle, it was, because Seattle put a moratorium on Ride the Ducks after this incident. Basically, like, they were like, you just can't drive around. You could only do water touring, basically. Like, you can't do the city driving components. In April 2016 in Boston, ducks killed another pedestrian. This time they settled with the family member, and that person basically was like, you have to do all these things to change your methodology and your safety inside city limits in Boston. And then later on, in July of 2018, in Branson, Missouri, where the company's was headquartered, 17 people died because the boat sunk in a hurricane, or like in a tornado hurricane level weather.
I think I remember this one too.
Yeah.
This was like the nail in the coffin on the ducks.
Yeah, it killed 17 people and injured 18 other people. And the captain of the boat was tried on 17 counts of involuntary manslaughter and 12 counts of endangerment of the welfare of children, along with the general manager of the company. And since this is at the Missouri branch, it's like that's the headquarters, and at this point Ripley owns the company, so they're just like, we're just gonna shut this thing down. So Ripley settles outside of court for an undisclosed amount, and they suspend operations for Ride the Duck in 2019. And then we all know what happens in 2020. COVID happens. No more duck tours. No more duck tours. No more money. No more tour because of COVID. And duck tour goes bankrupt.
The ducks died.
So the question is, and you see it a through line if you're reading all the articles, and I will post all the articles in the notes because there's a lot of good notes. How did this happen? How did we get to a point where basically a fun ride killed so many people?
I mean, can I supply the answer? My theory of the answer?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, well, it started off with a guy's presumably passion project, and it got sold to a corporation who then decided to cut costs on maintenance because maintenance was so expensive. And because these cars were almost 100 years old and not serviced correctly, they began to break apart. And when they broke apart, they sank and or their axles broke on the freeway. Did I get it right?
Wow, it's almost like you read the NTSB reports.
Who could have seen this coming?
The NTSB wrote 3 reports over essentially 20-year period or 15-year period from 99 to 2018 with the Missouri accident. And every single time it says, and you like, it's like you read my notes.
I didn't, for the record. Didn't. I really didn't.
And Michaela, tell them what was in big capital letters.
I was going to ask you what the giant letters were and if we had gotten to that. It says Capitalism Action Park in Jersey, Boeing here in Washington, or RTD.
Ride the Duck.
Oh, in Branson, Missouri. Oh, you're saying like we are seeing these patterns
over and over again
with the Boeing flight.
Yes, so
torn off. In
you
air.
Hit the nail on the head when I wrote, "How did this happen?" Driving these things or driving through dense areas. Seattle NTSB recommended the report for the NTSB recommended they not do that. That they have very small windows of when they're driving on land, aka when they're going from the land into the water, and then that's it. Do not try to drive it around the city.
Yeah. I mean, the pedestrian ones all seem to be because they do not have good lines of sight.
They're not meant to drive on city streets.
Right.
They were not built to drive on city streets.
There
were vehicles for the water to go basically on shore and then get off.
Yeah. But I'm not surprised because, like, as I correctly guessed, when you have to spend $20,000, this is just a number I made up, to break or to fix your rusting front axle, but you were like, but my car is only worth $6,000.
Right.
You don't, it's the same thing people do with their Hondas.
Right.
You're not going to replace the transmission that costs $3,000 on your Honda if it's only worth $2,000.
Right.
You just go buy a new Honda.
Only people who love their cars fix their cars like that, at that level.
And in this case, if it hadn't been pure profit margins, perhaps they would have been fixed.
Right.
Also, it's extremely difficult to service vehicles this old in general.
Yes.
Mostly, when they start breaking down, you're just going to have to decommission them. And then if you decommission enough, you don't have a company anymore.
That's the next bullet. Like you said, maintenance. The next bullet was lack of maintenance. Seattle NTSB report called out that the axle was destroyed probably way before this incident.
Yeah.
And the fact that it manifested itself then, and then also all the way in 99, the drive shafts of these vehicles were failing. Mm-hmm. The gaskets in these drive shafts were failing, is an indicator that this is a systematic problem. And they made several recommendations to the company that they do a recall on all the vehicles to fix the vehicles. And Michaela, you just hit the nail on the head. You know how expensive that would be for Ride the Duck, that all their boats are out of commission?
Well, you're being presented with the choice basically to close your company. So it's going to be close your company responsibly, maybe pivot and make like a museum,
or even find new water submergible vehicles that are built for that. Like you slowly phase out your old fleet and build new or buy new vehicles,
or make recreations or something.
Right?
Yeah,
with the money that you're making, that you're bringing in.
You could also pivot to a different business model, but the choices you have here are you slowly decommission and then close your company as the vehicles fail, or you push it and you do your little cost benefit analysis on the death of human life versus potential profits like airlines do.
Yes.
And then,
or airline manufacturers, some of them.
or you're just throwing the dice that it won't happen at all.
Right.
Depending on how ignorant you are, right?
Yeah.
And then you're forced to shut down anyway.
Right.
So.
And it's like make a lot of money up front right now. Or
be unethical, or be ethical and
lose a bunch of money
and prioritize people's safety. Yeah.
Right. And then the third bullet before the big letters I wrote was lack of safety protocols and safety. And it says Branson, the report from 2018 or off of the 2018 incident, called out that going out in the middle of 70 mile per hour winds, even though that's how the vehicle was sold in the World War, is not the same with that same vehicle 100 years later almost.
Yeah.
And that conditions, first of all, drivers are not trained to operate in hazardous conditions like that, so why are they going out? Secondly, there's not a standardized policy set across the company of when to equip life vests, when to ensure that, we have a no-go policy. And a lot of it came down to basically they didn't want to give out a refund. So they were like, well, we're going to go.
It's like when whale tours are like, oh, you'll get half off your next ticket if you don't see a whale. And then they'll also count, like, if you see a blow.
Yeah, like a breach
20 feet away.
Far away.
That counts.
And so I wrote in big capital letters, capitalism, because ultimately that's what is driving this constant need to make money, even at the expense of, like, your own customers. And ultimately it's your undoing, right? Because no one after that accident in 2015 wanted to get on a duck tour in Seattle proper. Like, I know plenty of people who had gone on those and were like, I'm not going back on that, even if they reopen. Because it was that was out of the water. That wasn't even in the water. And they have plenty of accidents in the water too.
Yeah.
And all that came out. All those nasty, like, deaths came out in the, like, post of that incident.
I really don't understand how this company was a nationwide company. Like, if it was just a Seattle location, I see it a little bit more because it feels more like a small business.
Right.
But this was a national company and you didn't have safety. Did you not have lawyers on your staff? Like, how do you not have safety protocols at least written down that they're supposed to follow? And then if they don't follow them, then that's the GM of that location's fault. Right. And then you as the company can sue the general manager for not following protocols or whatever it is,
Right. You're just saying, like, a little bit of CYA. And that's the interesting part, is that originally they were doing that. And then this Branson branch one happened, and that was at the home business. So if that home business isn't even following its own protocols,
that's what I mean.
Like, they really are cowboying it out there.
Like, seriously, did you not have lawyers?
And that's why I wrote down Action Park in New Jersey, because I was thinking at least Action Park in New Jersey had the good sense to, like, basically bribes state officials, like, at least had the good the wherewithal to be like, oh yeah, we're causing a lot of damage, we need to, like, cover our butt. Like, or like Boeing in this case too, but, like, all these companies are, taking the customer's life in their hands and being like, well, it's an engineering scenario that probably won't end well, but most of the time it will, so it won't matter if we make money most of the time.
I will say, of the quote unquote iconic tourist things to do in Seattle, of all the ones to die, this is probably the best one to die. You're really not missing anything. Like, you're not really losing the novelty. I barely remember riding the ducks. I didn't get in the water, so maybe I would have had a better impression of it. But like, if you've never rode the ducks, you didn't miss out on much.
Right. Yeah.
You can like recreate the experience if you go camping with someone who has a boat. Just sit in their boat as they're towing it towards the lake and then launch the boat.
It's the same feeling.
Yeah.
You're right. You're totally right. And I wrote sarcastically, there's a new duck in town.
The giant rubber duck.
No. Somebody tried to with new vehicles, quote unquote new vehicles.
The Cybertruck that's supposed to go in water but doesn't. No, actually there was Bill Nye, famous Seattleite, did have a convertible vehicle. There's one in Disneyland. It's an actual convertible.
Do you know who else had something like that?
I feel like when you say the name, I'm not going to be surprised because I knew it, but I couldn't tell you.
Former President Lyndon B. Johnson had a car like that.
I was about to say Truman.
Yeah,
so I was close.
He would bring like Democratic or even people that were not his friend or that were like from the other party into his estate. And like he lived in Texas and he would drive around in his like little thing and he would like just be ribbing at them and like taunting them and then just like be driving right straight into the water and be like, oh, that's weird, I get lost control of the vehicle, like he's like, I can't, and then he would just straight in the water and go, oh. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's Disney World has one that you can take a tour on. Incredibly expensive. It's not like it's like a premium feature. You have to pay a lot of money to do it.
Yeah.
But they'll like drive out in their little lagoon and then come back. It's a convertible
I feel
car.
like that's the most like the president trying to be a James Bond guy, but like it's such a dumb thing to waste your money on.
Yeah, and to clarify earlier, I don't know if Bill Nye owned that vehicle, but he used it in a Bill Nye video.
Mm-hmm. Didn't he go into Green Lake with it or something?
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, he drove into it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Green Lake. I don't think it was the Sound.
I jumped into Green Lake as a kid.
Like, I know, because you were afraid of a dog.
Yeah.
And your mom brings it up to this day.
Still to this day. Stupid kid. Green Lake's probably more dangerous than that dog was.
Yeah, that's why. She thinks it's gross that you jumped into Green Lake.
And now that I'm older, I'm like, wow, that is disgusting. Green Lake is worse than that dog.
So anyway, they could revive this.
They tried
to. Some
in
convertible
2022, somebody came around. It was called like Splash Tours or Splash City Tours or something stupid. And they tried in 2021 to get everybody pumped about it because the Duck Tours went out of business. And then they were unable to open. So I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know when it will happen, if it does. But it
doesn't have as much of a novel appeal unless you're like really, really into like technology marvels, I guess.
I secretly want, and I know this probably would cost so much money. I secretly kind of want them to. My dad was in the military, and he would talk about some of the vehicles that they would operate inside of that were amphibious vehicles. I kind of wish that they could get some of those old like Vietnam / Gulf War vehicles.
Yeah.
And just basically do the same thing, but like with vehicles that are like, instead of them being 100 years old, they're like 40 or 50 years old.
Yeah.
Because but the way he talks about them, they're always like, yeah, and there was water sloshing all over the place. This is gross. I hate this. Like, it doesn't sound fun. I don't know why people were like, I want to get in the boat that is not a boat.
Yeah, anyway, if you didn't get the chance to ride the ducks when the ducks were in Seattle, I I don't think you're missing much, especially knowing that this was not a Seattle-specific thing. Like, if it was just in Seattle, maybe they feel like you were missing out a lot. But
Right.
Knowing that it was nationwide, just like, meh.
Yeah, it's not. It's definitely, I wouldn't, and I never was interested in it. So I just kind of was like, oh, well, that's an interesting thing Seattleites do, like, bring their cousins to do when they visit them.
Yeah, go to the Pop Culture Museum instead.
Yeah, or go to Underground Seattle.
Underground Seattle's
so
cool.
much cooler.
Chihuly, is that how you pronounce it? The glass sculptures?
Oh, I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What other... There's a whole bunch of cool tours. The Trolls.
Not the Fremont Troll. The other Trolls.
The other Trolls.
I did go to the Fremont Troll the other day. You know what? It's fine.
And we'll leave it there. No, honestly, thank you all for listening. I'm glad to share another Seattle story with you. We got some more stuff lined up this...
Don't ask me what it is, because I don't know. It could be the Barefoot Bandit. Like, I might get it together enough to, like, actually close out.
You heard that, folks?
The fact is, it requires a lot of reading that I don't have time for.
Right. Very busy.
And there's not an audiobook of this one, folks. So anyway.
Yeah, the Barefoot Bandit, that's going to be a crazy story. I was here for that, so I'm kind of going to just sit back and enjoy.
I might just keep teasing it for, like, maybe that will be my white whale.
That's the one.
And you'll just keep hearing me talk about how I'm working on it, and you'll never hear the actual episode.
Yeah, my white whale is definitely the Pacific Northwest Indian Wars. I've been reading and building up for like 5 years for this particular podcast and project, so I get it. I'm not one to talk. So, but yeah, thank you all so much for listening. We'll get back to you with the new episode, and please, if you like our content, just give us a review. It really helps.
Share it with friends. We're trying to do a pyramid scheme here, guys.
If you share it with 2 other people,
who share it with two other people. Share it with 2 other people each.
Hey, Washington MLM situation is pretty wild. I'm not going to say it.
Bob Fergie has sued a bunch of them. But we don't want to talk about him right now. So.
We have so many military bases on this in this state that there's like a good subset of people who are just working in MLMs. Like,
put on your LuLaRoe. Maybe I'll talk about LuLaRoe being sued. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, leave us a review if you want to on the podcast platform of your choice. Send us an email at whatthewashington@gmail.com if you feel like it. Tell me what to cover.
We would love to cover a topic from whatever you guys have. And if you have any guest topics or guest people that you want us to talk to, let us know as well.
Yeah. I think that's it.
All right, we're out of here.
Bye.
Bye.